My next guest is Dr. Debbie Silver. Debbie is a brilliantly funny, beautiful, insightful, and boldly authentic speaker, author, and educator based in Melissa, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. She has dedicated her life to understanding learning and growth behavior and has become a world renowned and empowering speaker. Debbie is one of the most sought after presenters for professional development and education. Through her research, her outreach, and her humor, Debbie seeks to help teachers find the joy in the daily job of teaching so that children can embrace the satisfaction and pride of knowledge growth and self-worth. Debbie co-wrote the 2014 bestseller, Deliberate Optimism, Reclaiming the Joy in Education, which offers research-based strategies, practical examples, and thought-provoking scenarios to help recharge educators in schools. With a healthy dose of humor to make it fun, Deliberate Optimism demonstrates the difference a change in attitude can make. In her most recent best-selling book, Fall Down 7 Times, Get Up 8, Teaching Kids to Thrive, Essential Skills for Success, she's rewritten, and we're going to be talking about on the podcast today about some of the changes that have been made in that book. This book focuses a lot on the SEL-friendly classrooms and what that should look like, and provides a wealth of tools and strategies for those who want to teach life skills beyond the standards. Welcome to the podcast, Debbie.
Hi, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I reached out to you because you were a speaker at the AMLE conference last fall, and you had several sessions that I found very inspiring, a lot of resources, and you were going to be talking about some of the PD that you've been doing during the pandemic as well. But let's start off talking about the time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Probably, it's when people say, "How did you get into teaching?" Because
Uh-huh.
that was not my game plan, and I had a whole other career path in mind, and fell in love, got married too young, 20 years old, and left college. I only had 2 years of education. I mean, 2 years of college education, but none of those were in the field of education because I never saw myself as wanting to be a teacher. But we moved to this little bitty town in called Logansport, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
It's right on the Texas border, population 1,200,
Wow.
and it was a step back in time. I mean, this was a time when the schools were still segregated, the
Mm-hmm.
town was segregated. It was a little bit like Mayberry, RFD, except a lot of tension there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went in and started working at the family hardware store, and the superintendent came in and said, I want to offer you a job as a teacher. And I just started laughing. I
Wow.
said, I only have 60 hours, and those are not in education. He said, we're desperate. And they were, because it was so poor economically. They had no money to pay. I think beginning teacher salary was like $8,800 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the federal judges had weighed in and said, you're going to start integrated schools. And you're going to start that process by inviting some Caucasian teachers, into your all black schools and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. So he said, we would like to offer you that opportunity to go to Logansport Rosenwald. Well, Rosenwald was like a block from my house. I could have walked there. And I said, I don't mind doing that, but I'm not a teacher. And he said, oh, just come on, help us out. I said, no, seriously. I said, I don't like school. I don't like teachers. And I don't think I like little kids. He said, well, they're not that little. And I said, well, what grade are we talking about? He said, I believe it's a fourth grade position.
Uh-huh.
I said, I have no idea how old are fourth graders. And he said, well, they're 8, 9, 10, 16. I'm like, no, 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 no. And he was like, oh, Miss Pace, help us out. And that was my name then. I was Debbie Pace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm embarrassed, Dana, because what I really thought was, that's got to be, beating in this, working in this hardware store. And it can't be that hard. I was a really
Yeah.
good babysitter. And, what do? You go at 8, you get off at 3. And I signed all the paperwork right there in the hardware store. So
Wow. They
there
had it all ready for you in the hardware store to go.
Oh no, the hardware store remained part of my life. Anyway, So this was June, and school was going to start in August. And I said, "Now look," his name was Mr. McLaurin. I said, "I really don't know anything about teaching, at all. What happens next?" He said, "Well, school takes in." That's redneck for begins. School takes in on August the 24th, and I think out there at Logansport Rosenwald they take in around 8 o'clock. So on August the 24th, you'll want to get out there at least a quarter till 8.
Uh-huh.
Period. No training, no books,
Yeah.
no guides, no nothing. Now I'm an idiot, so I'm going, well, okay. And the thing was, back then they didn't have any money. They didn't pay teachers to come and work, in their rooms. There was nothing going on in the summer. The school just
Hmm.
locked up tight. Couldn't even get into the school. And teachers did not come back till the day school opened, and that was the day kids came. Also,
Yeah.
everybody showed up. So I show up, and people they're a little leery because I'm Caucasian and it's an all African American school. But people were friendly to me because I was friendly, and they just thought I was an idiot because I didn't speak. And I thought I was an idiot. And come to find out, my room is out on the playground. I had that little army barracks room they brought in for the overflow.
Hmm.
And so I go out there and it's, oh my God, it's dirty wooden floor, paint peeling off the walls. And I'm just standing there with my purse and I'm thinking, I probably should have brought a poster, but I don't know what fourth graders like.
Uh-huh.
So, anyway, a teacher that later became my mentor had said, I'm going to bring your kids to you because they don't know they're getting a Caucasian teacher and it might scare them. So I'll get them prepared and I'll bring them in. And she did. And I looked at them and I said, you guys are really short. And I said, what grade are you in? And a little girl said, first. And I
Oh,
went,
wow.
no, 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 no. I'm the fourth grade teacher. And of course, they started crying, And then I said, wait, no, please, please don't do that. And because we didn't have an awning, it was pouring down rain. And I knew I couldn't take them all to the office with me. And I didn't know what to do because the intercom was broken, of course.
Hmm.
So I wrote a note to the office and I said, Dear office, there are first graders in my room. What should I do with them? And we waited for the note to come back and it said, Dear Miss Pace, you're the first grade teacher. Teach them. Love the office. Oh my God. Oh my God. So I've got all these kids, and we didn't have pre-registration. Our parents had
Hmm.
no transportation, no way to get to the schools, so they just got on the bus with their birth certificate and their shot record. And
Hmm.
I'm the one that's supposed to do all the records. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to figure all this stuff out. And of course, I'm from Texas, and this is Louisiana, and the certificates don't even look the same, and I can't make it all work. And a lot of them, it was like father unknown. And I was not knowing what to do. And, I'm upset. The kids are upset. I'm trying to play, who's your daddy? And it's not going well. And eventually, I just started crying. And the minute I started crying, my first grader stopped crying.
Oh,
And I just
wow.
sat down on that little dirty floor and the kids all piled up around me and they're brushing my hair, and they're patting my face. Don't cry. It'll be okay. Breathe. And I said, guys,
Wow.
listen, I have to tell you something. I'm not from Logansport and
Mhm.
I'm not doing very well. That's okay. Don't cry. I said, no, see, I'm not even a real teacher. They were like, no kidding. I said, but at lunch, I'm going to quit. Well, then they start crying again, don't leave us. And I went, no, no, I'm not going to leave you by yourself. See, I'm going to go over to the office and I'm going to resign. And then they're going to get you a real teacher.
Mhm.
And they said, we don't want a real teacher. We want you.
Mhm.
And then I just burst out and I said, why? And honestly, they told me one of the most important things I've ever learned about teaching. And they said, we want you to stay with us because you're nice and because you care about us. And they said, we don't want you to leave because you love us. I said,
Wow.
that is so true. I said, but y'all are the nicest people I've met in Logansport. I said, but um, seriously, I need to leave. And they said, no, you have to stay. I said,
Mhm.
guys, I don't know how to teach. And my little first graders looked up at me and said, we'll show you. And when they said that, I just said, all right, let's do this. And it was crazy. I mean, I didn't know anything. And out there in this little Army barracks room by myself, there was another first grade teacher, but she was in the building and she was kind of had her hand in everything else. She was too busy. We didn't have mentors or any of that. So I'm just trying to make my way and try to
Mhm.
learn to teach. And I know at one point about Christmas time, I had some kids that still were not reading even basic sight words, and realized these kids had never gone to kindergarten. I was their first teacher in their entire lives, and so I felt like such a failure. And
Mhm.
the teacher, Miss Murray, who was my mentor, said, Miss Pace, she said, you need to give yourself some time. And this is something we never talk about anymore, but we should. She said, there's this thing called readiness. And when
Mhm.
those kids get ready, they will learn. And she said,
Mhm.
you're going to be shocked. She said, give yourself till after Christmas and see what happens to you. And so I did. And sure enough, after Christmas, some of those kids, it's just like the light went on. They had to
Mhm.
reach that perfect moment, to start learning. So we made it. We made it through the first grade. And the thing was that I had 4 or 5 out of my 24 students that didn't learn to read well enough to go to second grade.
Mhm.
And so I went to the principal and said, I'm going to have to hold them back. And he said, you can't. And what we knew then, what we believed then was if you passed a kid when they weren't ready, you were
Mhm.
finishing them to failure the rest of their lives. And so I was devastated. I said, why not? He said, and part of it was because I was Caucasian, and if I
Mhm.
didn't
Mhm.
pass them, it was going to be this political. So he said, pick 3. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm not gonna do this. And he said, Miss Pace, it's the only way.
Mhm.
So we did that. Well, it turns out we had a shift in our student population, and they didn't need a first grade teacher except
Okay.
for that one year. So they said we're going to move you up to fourth grade, and I was like, no, no, I need my first graders. And they went, no, you're going to do fourth grade. So I did fourth grade. Loved them because they got my humor a little better. And somewhere in there, I look back. I got second grade. I got third grade. But
Mhm.
when my life changed was when we finally integrated our schools. And when they did, they made me a middle school teacher. And I'm fighting and screaming, going, no, no,
Mhm.
I'm not who I am. That's not what I know how to do. And I walked into that sixth grade class the first day, and they got my jokes, they got my
Mhm.
humor, they laughed at the appropriate times. They didn't wet their pants. I really have a lot of ADHD, just like squirrel. And that worked a lot better because first
Mhm.
graders are just so sweet and they're so, but they would tell me stories like, you know what? And then one time, and you know what else? And then, but first, wait, okay, first. And I'm like, what is your point? Uh, so when I found where I fit,
Mhm.
it was like the light came on. I always loved it, but I really loved it when I found my place. The
Mhm.
other thing was that people say, well, how did you make it, being Caucasian in an all African American school? And also, I'm a city girl, I'm from Fort
Mhm.
Worth, and I'm in this rural school. And I think the best thing was I was so young, I was 20 and so naive. And so I wasn't judgy. It was like when I would hear about things that were said differently or done differently, I'd go, really? Why do y'all do that? And then they'd
Mhm.
explain it to me. I'd say, oh, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And, I've always said it's hard to not like somebody who loves your kids. And
Mhm.
I think that was the big thing was I so loved those kids. And they were just amazing. And I think people understood that because, after a while I had a choice. I could have transferred to another school, but I didn't want to. I mean, I loved where I was. And then I found my fit. I
Mhm.
started teaching science, which was funny because I hated science when I was in school, but I think it made me a better science teacher. because I didn't assume anybody knew anything. And
Hmm.
I'm very hands on, need to touch it, hold it, feel it. And so that's the way I taught it, even before that got really popular. So it just, when I think the irony is, and I tell teachers this all the time, when those little first graders said, "We'll show you how to teach,"
Hmm.
they did, because I didn't know anything. I didn't know about, differentiated learning. And so I had kids that really struggled, with reading and writing, and some of them with math too. But I'd look at them and I just look at their spark in their eyes and I go, "But you know this." And they're
Hmm.
like, "Yeah." And I
Hmm.
go, you can tell me this, but you can't put it on paper." And that's when I just started figuring out, okay, I got to figure some way for these kids to hold it, feel it, touch it, see it, to make
Hmm.
sense to them. So without anybody having to tell me, I just broke away from, because what I was doing was what our teachers did, when I was in school,
Hmm.
and they didn't mean it, as trying to be horrible. It's just the way they learn, so they expected everybody else to learn that way. And then here came this little teacher, just that's not like everybody else. But when the kids would go, "That's really hard," I'm going, "I know." I had
Hmm.
trouble with that too. Let's find another way. Let's make it into a song, or let's make it into a dance or a cheer. And so differentiated instruction started for me early on, just watching the kids and seeing what worked. So that was my struggle. Didn't intend to be a teacher. Didn't want to be a teacher. And after just a short amount of time, I realized this is the most important thing I can do to contribute to the world today.
Hmm.
This is it. And later on, when I wrote my book, Fall Down Seven Times, Get Up Eight, and I was talking about, grow where you're planted, I
Hmm.
think that was it. I was caught in a world, and I love Logansport. Don't get me wrong. I learned so many important lessons from being in a small town that I never got from living in a city.
Hmm.
But when I said, okay, and it looked like we were going to live there all our lives because my husband's family and their family, we've got, so it's like, okay, I'm here. This is what's available. All the things that I had planned to do, be a writer, be a comedian, that's not really on the table right now. So let
Hmm.
me grow where I'm planted. And I was very curious and very eager, to try new things, which was also very, very helpful. And I guess a lot of it was just the appreciation. I was so glad to have that job, and so
Hmm.
glad to have a chance to be, a little bit creative, because when you're selling, nuts and bolts, there's not much creative going on there.
Yeah. Wow, that's such a amazing story, basically, because you fell into education
Yeah,
from being in that hardware store, right? And then meeting a teacher, and then the fact that you kind of were talked back into not resigning that same day by the
right.
first graders,
By the
right?
first graders, yep. They're like, "Please don't leave us." I'm like,
And you learned so
all
much
right.
from them, right? You built those relationships with them, found out how to teach them. They taught you how to teach, and then
They did.
you discovered different grade levels and kind of found your niche. So yeah, that was definitely an evolving process. But like a lot of people today, you wouldn't just be kind of picked off the street or from a store job to
No,
become a teacher, but you were able to do it, right? You were able to learn as you went, right? And that worked, and you stayed in education. And like you said, grow where you're planted, right? And we're happy to, you have contributed so much to the field of education. So,
well, it was interesting because as soon as I made that decision, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life, I
mhm,
immediately would drive across the border back into Texas and went to Stephen F. Austin State University and finished that first degree. And to
mhm.
hear these professors who hadn't been in a classroom, in
Yeah,
20 years pontificating, and I just walked out of a classroom, to get over
yeah,
there for my night courses, and I'm sitting there going, "That is a bunch of crap. That is
yeah.
so not right." And I had a teacher one time at the university that said, "A good lesson plan will solve all your discipline problems." And I'm like, So, but I loved, I had some really great teachers at Stephen F. Austin that loved the fact that I was doing what I did.
Hmm.
And this was also a time, it was the early 70s. So, we're going through a really, the individualized
Hmm.
instruction, the put the kids first, it was John Holt. And my teachers had me reading those people. So that was my first influence, were people that really believed every kid deserves a reasonable chance at success.
Hmm.
And I believed it. And so I had a lot of support. And then later, when I went to LSU Shreveport for my master's, that's when I really learned theory because I basically missed all that, as an
Hmm.
undergraduate. So that makes me question how much of that do our undergrads really need? And when
Hmm.
I taught at the university level, what the students gravitated to were my stories about teaching
Hmm.
and these circumstances and what did you do here and why did you do that. And I'm a huge believer in finding your own voice as a teacher, and
Hmm.
I'm saying don't try to be me because it's not going to work for you. I'm obviously an extrovert, and I was using my humor in the class. And I was also writing some. I wrote letters to all my students, even when I taught over 200 kids a day in middle school. I would write everybody letters and tell them my favorite things about them, my dreams for them, what I hope they'd remember about being in the classroom. But I'd say that's who I am. I really liked doing that. But you have to be who you are. And
Yeah.
if you're an introvert, or if you're that concrete sequential, you're going to be a benefit to kids that I'm not reaching like you will.
Hmm.
So that's huge for me. And I think the reason I'm still in these many, many years later, is because I was able to, all those things I wanted to be, like a comedian and a writer, well, I kind of am.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was able to reach that, by being myself and doing it my way as a teacher. But
Hmm.
continuing to learn from others because Lord, I had to learn everything. I
Yeah.
didn't know how to take up lunch money. I didn't know anything. But you can do it. And of course, you're not going to let people like me in the classroom anymore because, got to pass the praxis and all. But I do have I really think their second year in college, if people know they're going to be teachers, we need to have them in schools.
Hmm.
We need to, I need to teach my classes in a school. And a lot of universities do this. I should be home based in a school so that they're constantly seeing what it's like, what it means, what are the kids like when the classes, come into contact with an irate parent, but get a real feel for what it's like and not this idealized, I'm going to have my perfect little bulletin boards and I'm going to have my perfect little goals and we're going to meet those. They need to be realistic about it. And I think
Hmm.
if we had an internship, maybe like Canada does, where we pay people to be an intern their first couple of years, I think we'd have a better rate of people staying in the profession. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they get a
Exposing them to classrooms earlier on in their
yes,
program. Yeah,
and I
because
also okay,
a lot of the time, they're doing that their last year or even just their last semester of
right.
their bachelor's. So,
And when I taught at Louisiana Tech, people would always say, "Why do you have so many middle school science teachers coming out of Louisiana Tech?" Uh, but I would teach everybody, the
hmm.
pre to high school teachers on the introductory, and I'd hear these kids say things like, "Yeah, I guess I'm gonna teach first grade. Give me those little rugrats." And I'm going, I don't think so.
Hmm.
Have you thought about middle school with your sarcasm?
Yeah.
Really think you're missing it. And then I'd have some of my, precious little introverts going, well, I really think I might want to try middle school. I'm going, could we just let's rethink that? All right. Let me give you
Yeah.
some things to ponder because I guess I've been in it so long, it's kind of easy for me to see where people are going to fit. And I
Hmm.
think so many times we lose teachers not because of the profession, because they're in a place where they don't fit. And it could be the
Hmm.
wrong discipline, it could be the wrong age group, it could be the wrong school, or it could be the wrong wing of the school.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
get tossed in with the negative Nellies and um, you lose your optimism. You lose your focus. And so that's why it's so important to me that we get mentors out there who really love and believe in kids and communicate that. And I was blessed because I got that from my university professors. And honestly, they were a bunch of hippies. Let's just be honest. That's who my teachers were. Just a bunch of hippie freaks. And I learned so much from them. And that goodness and that kindness and that compassion aspect was just, that's all they wanted to talk about. And they had us read a lot of really good books, not about theory, but like
Mhm.
just about kids and about kids who overcame adversity and kids that made it happen. And a lot of books about how one teacher, you know, changed lives for kids. And that was so inspiring to me. And I
Mhm.
kept thinking, I want to do that. I want to be that teacher. I want to make this happen.
You were already doing that, though.
Well, but I was limping along.
Yeah.
I tell my students now, and I still hear from ones that I had way back in the early 70s who are now grandparents. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh my God. But they'll just say, oh, Miss Page, you were the best teacher. And I'm like, no, I really was not a good teacher compared to what I know now. But
Hmm.
it goes back to that connection that you make. I
Hmm.
made so many pedagogical mistakes. I mean, I did, seriously. I shouldn't have been there. But I think as far as the connections that I made, kind of, I hope made up for some of my errors about,
Hmm.
technically how do you teach. But that came pretty quickly, because teachers are sharp. We have to be. And
Hmm.
we pick stuff up. And once I figured out, okay, it's more than just the heart of teaching. There is an art to teaching.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
got to learn that too. And of
Hmm.
course, today, young people have the advantage of the internet and so many resources because I used to buy books with my own money. I'd go out and I'd buy books about teaching, and maybe there'd only be 2 or 3 strategies in the whole book that I could even use that were even applicable to me. And workshops, we paid our own way to go to workshops and paid for a
Hmm.
sub to go to workshops. But I did because I learned so much. And sometimes when I'm talking to people new in the field, and I don't want to sound like, well, we walked uphill both ways to school in the snow.
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound like that, but I do want to say, please avail yourself of these resources that you have at your fingertips.
Hmm.
I mean, you can find, if you can't think of a creative way to do it, there is somebody out there that has already thought of it. And they'll share it with you because that's the way teachers are. It's, oh, please take it, use it, make it better, give it to other people. And for us to ignore that, and when I taught at the university level, really try to impress upon my students what those resources were and how valuable they were.
Hmm.
And you don't want to get overwhelmed with it, but find a few that you really support and believe and follow them, and then try some of those suggestions. And they won't all work for you,
Hmm.
but that's
Hmm.
okay. You know that then.
Yeah, so kind of talking about resources, I said in the intro a little bit about the revisions on your book. They're coming out in May. And tell me a little bit about what you're adding and how that'll help teachers who are planning their lessons and looking at curriculum as they plan for the 21-22 school year.
Yeah, that was my favorite book I've written. I've written 4 books, and 2 of those are co-written with other authors and other teachers. But my favorite book I've written was "Fall Down 7 Times, Get Up 8," which was my second book that I wrote, and it was about what we're talking about now about building resiliency, building um, resilience in students, perseverance, and I see that, when I run into the students I have had before, they tell me things like, "You're the one that taught me, to keep going and keep
Hmm.
trying." And so I was out of the classroom. I'd been teaching at the university, but I would go in and do guest presentations
Hmm.
in classes. And I'm a science teacher, so of course they're going to be excited. I've got rockets, I got snakes, and I'd usually set up in a central location, and I tell the kids, "All right, when you finish, whatever it is that you were working on, come on over here, and I'm going to show you some cool stuff." And I would have kids that would just sit there, and I'd say, "Are you coming?" And they'd say, "Well, what do we get if we come
Mhm.
up there?" I'm like, "What do you get if you come up here? Let me tell you what you're gonna get if you don't get your little butt out of." I'm just like, and so I start looking around, and I'm visiting a lot of schools, and I'm seeing this entitlement thing,
Mhm.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Whoa!" And somebody better come help me. Somebody better come do this for me. And I thought, no, 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 no. We need to address this. Mainly because I think it's my generation, the boomers, that caused
Mhm.
all this in the first place. And I talk about that in the book. But, so many times when I'm working with teachers, they're like, Deb, we totally agree with you in theory.
Yeah.
We know that you're right. But what does that look like? I
Yeah.
mean, how would that work in my situation? So the book is actually for parents and for administrators and for teachers. But I'll take a theory like self-efficacy and how do you um, further that with the way that you give feedback. And I give very specific ways to do that. And then I'll give examples. And because I'm me, some of them are kind of funny and off the wall, but you get the idea. And it'll say, instead of saying this, say this
Mhm.
is better, or this is even better, but then I'll explain the theory and why. So it sold like 18,000 copies, and it was doing really well. And my new editor, because my old editor retired, and Ariel Curry called and said, Deb, would you want to do an update? And I was really thinking about writing a new book.
Mhm.
I thought, that would be terrific because that book was written before the pandemic,
Mhm.
before our social revolution, so to speak, before virtual learning. And I said, I need to revisit this in terms of what's going on right now in schools.
Mhm.
And there's some things I need to add. So when I redid it, I had found so many videos, and I'm that person, I'm the picture smart person. Show me a
Mhm.
picture, and I will remember. So we did QR codes. So you can actually be reading the book, put your phone on it, and watch this
Mhm.
quick video that has that actual author speaking or has an actual, explanation. So that was something real positive. Then I had so many questions from the first time about how does this work with gifted learners? And
Mhm.
two of my sons were identified as gifted and talented. So I have a lot of, investment in that. So I pulled one of the chapters talking about growth mindset, Carol Dweck's work, and aligned that with giftedness for parents who have that kid that's been identified as, just exceptional
Mhm.
in certain areas because they too get that entitlement sometimes. And I've
Mhm.
lived with a couple of them and I know it's true. And then I honestly had to face the digital world. So I have a
Mhm.
whole chapter, and I went in and read, several books that people have been reading, about what the captivation with the digital world is doing to our kids in terms of lack
Mhm.
of perseverance, lack of initiative, and I start the book talking about that. I said, if the pandemic showed us nothing else, it showed us that our kids are not really good yet about being self motivated learners.
Mhm.
We had such a huge number of kids that once they came out of a classroom where they were closely shepherded,
Mhm.
closely monitored, closely scripted, and now they're away and they can't raise their hand and ask a question every time they want to. A lot of them just defaulted and said, well, I can't do this. This is too hard.
Yeah.
This, and so my point is, we've got to give those kids the way that you approach a problem like that. It's okay. Here's what it is. Here's what I can't control, but here's what I can control, and what can I do about it? So I make the argument that I think all kids are motivated learners um,
Mhm.
until we until we beat it out of them.
Yeah.
But, kids that are naturally curious and they want to investigate and they want to know what's going on and watch them doing the things they want to do. Like mastering a new skateboard trick or mastering a new level in their video game. Okay, well, I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as something we should learn from. We, the educators, should say, what is it that is engaging that child that we can also capture to help engage them in things that maybe not seem so fun right now, but to teach them that a lot of times, and we have to establish that credibility with our learners to say,
Mhm.
I understand what you're saying, and I know this is not the fun part. As a matter of fact, I hated this when I had to do it.
Mhm.
But let me just assure you that where you tell me you're wanting to go, nobody ever got there without doing the steps we're doing now.
Yeah.
This is just part of the process. We're going to do this, and I'll help you think of ways to make it more fun,
Mhm.
or to make it more entertaining, but we're not going to skip it. And we're
Yeah.
not going to smooth over it. And that's my problem right now. It's the parents that my generation raised. I have 5 sons, so and
Mhm.
lots of grandkids. So I watch it. Everything the kid does. Good job, buddy. Good job.
Mhm. Mhm.
You
Mhm.
breathed in. Good job. You exhaled. Wow. Like, guys, too much. And I've got a chapter about feedback, and
Mhm.
actually, it should be a letter to Debbie because I was always so over the top with my
Yeah.
aggressiveness. Because that's who. Oh, you're a rock star. Oh man, you're gonna win the Pulitzer Prize. You're just so great. And I got a little indication one time. I remember when I was teaching middle school, two little girls, one they were talking about something, and one said, "Well, go ask Miss Pace if she thinks it's any good." And her friend said, I could hear her, and she said, "No, that won't do any good. She likes everything." And I thought, oh, you know, at first I thought that was a compliment, and then I thought, but I have no power with that child. I have no credibility. In other
Mhm.
words, I can't believe Miss Pace because she likes everything. So that was not the role I needed. So I understood I had to stop just this over the top stuff I was doing, but I didn't know how to change that.
Mhm.
The other thing was because my students, some of them didn't even have indoor plumbing, they had nothing.
Mhm.
And I had this existential guilt because I'd gone to this huge high school that taught 5 foreign languages. We had everything. So I'm in this little school and my heart is breaking for my kids. And I had a lot of sympathy. And what Brene Brown, from Texas, who's studied shame and guilt, and I love her, has taught me is that sympathy will separate you from others. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, you poor little thing, you don't have as much, so maybe you lower your expectation. Whereas empathy, it teaches us to hear them and listen to their stories and say, I understand how hard this must be for you. And
Mhm.
I understand that maybe you don't even have a table where you can make your salt map, which is what happened one time with me.
Yeah.
But to say, okay, but here's my goal for you. So let's you and I work together on something you can do.
Mhm.
So we can see how you can shine. And so my sympathy has changed to empathy over the years, thank goodness. But I'm still learning about proper feedback, which is still very hard for me. Dweck says you don't tell people how smart they are, you don't tell them how talented they are. That our praise should stay on what they can control.
Mhm.
If we're constantly telling kids you're so pretty, you're so smart, you're so gifted, you're so blessed, you're so talented, that either leads them to feeling entitled, and at some point they are going to top off,
Mhm.
and then they're going to be mad because they're going to think they were sold a bill of goods, or they're going to hear you saying that to other people and think, I don't really have that. And so they learn to be helpless. I'm not even going
Mhm.
to try because I wasn't born that talented, or I wasn't born to a place where my dad's the coach and can work with me. And we're giving them excuses, not to succeed.
Mhm.
So my idea is we take kids wherever they are, race, gender, socioeconomic, religious, don't care. Don't care. Take them where they are, not where we wish they'd be, not where they ought to
Mhm.
be, not where the teacher last year said they were. Where are they right now? And then we raise the bar just beyond their reach for every
Mhm.
single kid, that you're always reaching to the next level and that's a good thing. The
Mhm.
fact that you had to work hard, the fact that you had to stumble, the fact that you did a complete U-turn in there, those are good things. Those are positive things. And we say that and model that and reiterate that to kids so they get it in their head. When I
Mhm.
make a mistake, It's just a fall. It's
Hmm.
not a fail.
Yeah.
Failure is just a temporary circumstance that teaches me something. So, what I've learned to do with students, and this is all in my book because I talk about it, is when somebody does, a total face plant, and we all hate that, it's so embarrassing.
Hmm.
What we say as the adult advocate is, man, that had to be that had to be hard. Nobody likes that. So, what you learn from that, and always reiterate there's a lesson in that,
Hmm.
and be real with them, going, that probably just embarrassed the fire out of you. And I know that you don't want to go to school tomorrow. I get that. I'm right there with you. But let's talk about the things you can control, and let's talk about the things you can't control,
Hmm.
and let's maximize those things there. What can you do about this? Well,
Yeah.
everybody else is up. What that you can't control what other people think. What other people think is none of your business. Let's control what you think. And
Hmm.
I'm big into role playing, and I have that throughout the book, is to prepare those kids ahead of time so that they're not faced with major decisions in the middle of crisis. That's the first
Hmm.
time they've ever thought about it. So it's a great thing for parents, especially, but also teachers to say, we're going to go on this field trip, and let's just kind of brainstorm some things that might happen and what would we do, what would be the best for everybody. But they already have that toolkit built up
Hmm.
so that in times of crisis, in times where that amygdala in their brain is going full force,
Yeah.
that prefrontal cortex has a few tools to go, wait, 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 I have choices here, and
Hmm.
make them understand the consequences of their choices. So, I may get some pushback with this book. My husband says that some of the things I'm saying are going against what a few groups are now saying about how people should be entitled to certain things because what's gone on in the past.
Hmm.
And I'm going to say what I've always said. I'm not as much interested in the past as
Yeah.
I am right now. And my job is to help every parent, no matter where you came from or where you are right now, to help you maximize your child's fullest potential. I do believe that all kids can learn. I think they learn at different times, but they learn.
Hmm.
And I do believe they learn best in a place where they feel safe, where they feel supported, where they feel heard, and where they're not judged all the time. So, don't even start me on standardized tests because that's another thing I can't stand. And I make several smart remarks in my book about that.
Hmm.
But I just feel like, it bothers me that everybody's talking now about our learning loss through the
Hmm.
pandemic. I'm going, loss according to what? Because the whole world has been through the same thing. We've all, not been in our routine.
Hmm.
But where did it come from Mount Sinai saying that by fourth grade, you
Yeah.
have to master these, math skills? All right, you didn't get it because of whatever reason. So let's get it now. Let's do it now. I
Hmm.
mean, we're operating from a deficit theory,
Yeah.
and here are all these people far removed from education making decisions about what goes on in education, which really ticks me off. But it is that deficit, oh, low, look what
Hmm.
happened to us, Eeyore, instead of looking at those teachers who, the day that we closed the schools, went home, got online, rolled their sleeves up, and went, well,
Yeah.
I better learn this virtual learning because I don't know
Hmm.
squat about it. And they did it, and they did what they needed to do. And mistakes were made. Well, hello, that's part of the process.
Hmm.
And I'm dealing with teachers that were veterans like me saying, I just need to get out of the profession. I didn't want to teach like this. This isn't why I got into it. No. And I'm like, uh, could you just think about when you first started teaching?
Hmm.
Did
Hmm.
you have everything in place? Did you have your routines and your procedures? And, you could shoot from the hip because no, you had to learn all that. But you gave yourself time to learn it because you were new. And people would say that, well, she's new.
Hmm.
What they did with
Hmm.
me, she's new. She's from the city, you can't. But that's we needed to give ourselves some time, and administrators needed to support that. But I also do this thing with learning styles, and I've talked about what people with different learning styles need to get for themselves for virtual learning,
Mhm.
and that we curriculum planners need to make sure that happens for them, because we know concrete sequentials really just need a step by step. They also need a timeline, because that's how they function best. First do this, then do this, teach me the program, blah, 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 blah. Then you've
Mhm.
got the me's out there, the abstract random, just going, well, let's just ooh, squirrel, just something cool, fun. Oh, I found this
Mhm.
last night, guys. Let's take a look at this. And somewhere in between, we have to make it okay for teachers to teach in their own style. But what
Mhm.
we started getting was this scripted curriculum, because everybody wanted to control everything, and
Yeah.
let's do it. I'm like, guys, you're going to lose your teachers. We've got into this because we're autonomous, because we want to be ourselves and be with our kids. And let's not forget that resource is your greatest resource you have anyway.
Mhm.
And I've always said, if the teacher ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
let's invest in our educators who are
Mhm.
killing themselves, but make it as easy as possible as we can for them.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think administrators and instructional coaches and people that support teachers have learned a lot throughout the past year on giving teachers support, giving them time, and also encouraging them to take time for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about what kind of professional development you've been hosting this past year, and maybe some schools that you've been working with, and then what do you have maybe planned for early summer if you're going to be a keynote speaker or breakout sessions at any well-known conferences?
In a few, yes, most of I was, on board to do some really well-known conferences, but
Hmm.
those got put on hold. I just did a series for INTACE. It's a European association that's um, really it was a pleasure to be invited. I'm their keynote,
Hmm.
and also doing some in-depth research on two different books. But they, for the most part, and this has been fun because it went from classroom management and things I usually do, the fall down 7 times, get up 8, and teaching kids to thrive, which is social emotional learning. Although that's seeing a big bounce now. People are
Hmm.
saying, yeah, we do need that. So I'm grateful about that from the pandemic. But immediately, because I'd done a couple of free webinars for teachers on called Practicing Safe Stress, and it was
Hmm.
funny, and it was about how crazy this all is, but how to take care of yourself. Well, that actually came. It was a part of the book Deliberate Optimism,
Hmm.
Reclaiming the Joy in Education. So that just kind of took off, and people were saying, "Can you please talk to my staff? They're so beaten down. They're beating themselves up. Can you talk to them?" And it was amazing because some of the things I've been talking about for several years, about taking care of yourself,
Hmm.
um, control what you can't control. Well, now that's everywhere. Everybody's
Yeah.
talking about that, which is great because as long as people get the message, I don't care where they get it, but they need to understand it. And I think people have always, when I've delivered, it's like, that's really true. And, particularly administrators, maybe I ought to think about that. But now we feel that need,
Hmm.
my teachers
Hmm.
are on that, just looking for somebody to choke, just
Yeah, yeah, because it got to the breaking point, right?
so they're reaching into their tool bag. So that's a lot of
Mhm.
what I do is just tips. And basically what I tell them is I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. I mean,
Mhm.
taking care of yourself, there is nothing new out there.
Mhm.
But I'm going to give it to you from the perspective of a teacher and a
Mhm.
mother, and how this would work. And I just want you to take it and apply it to your life. And I teach with stories, so I have lots of stories, and I love great quotes, so I'll offer that for teachers. But I try to not get real. I read the theory, understand the theory, but I figure right now most teachers just hold off on that. We
Hmm.
want
Hmm.
to hear about, how do we build a positive school climate? How do I take better care of myself? Those are my two main ones right now. I mean, almost everybody asks about those.
Hmm.
Now I'm starting to get some things about drumming to the beat of different marchers. I just did that with Colleen, and these were high school. But what are some ways we acknowledge and address the needs of kids who do learn in a different way, which is one
Hmm.
of my favorite topics. That's what my first book is about. But my kids at Rosenwald taught me that, just because I'm not a strong reader, just because I'm not really good, manipulating numbers does not mean I'm dumb. It
Hmm.
just means I have to work harder. And so I'm very mindful of that. So I'm trying to think this summer what I really love to do is open up school, conclaves.
Hmm.
And I like that. And, get people ready to roll. But I've told principals before, I said, I'll come and I will be in August. Most will be in person, but
Hmm.
a few will be still virtual. But I said, when you really need me, it's probably January.
Yeah.
Because most people are pretty excited about school starting. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is so cool. We're so excited. And I don't mind. I love that. I love being back around all of that. It reminds me of, I want to get in my room. I want to get my stuff ready. But I think that I serve probably a greater need when I come after school has started and
Yeah.
dew has worn off to
Yeah.
remind teachers, okay, here's why you're doing what you do. Just
Hmm.
just in case you forgot, because it is easy. And if you're a new teacher, you don't have those stories to fall back on. You
Hmm.
don't have that kid that came, you had 15 years ago that said, you changed my life,
Hmm.
and you're like, what? What's your name? Uh, but when you have that, you have that power within you to say, I'm going to keep going. And in
Hmm.
my presentation on deliberate optimism, what I say is we owe it to our kids to be optimistic.
Hmm.
Even if you don't feel optimistic, um, you need to convey that. And I'm not saying pharmaceutically induced, that.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's the way you look at the world and the way you
Hmm.
frame things. Because I never want anybody out there teaching who says, away from the kids, it doesn't matter what I do. Nothing I do is going to change things. The
Hmm.
administration's against me. The parents are this. The kids are that. And I'm like, if that's what you really believe, please resign. Please
Hmm.
resign yesterday because you don't need to be here. I only want people in front of kids who believe that what they're doing does make a difference. Maybe not as much as we want, and probably not as quickly as we want,
Hmm.
but it does. It does make a difference.
Hmm. Well, out of everything we talked about today on the podcast, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Here's my go-to phrase: every student deserves a reasonable chance at success. Now, let me just explain that for a second. We're talking a lot about equity. We're
Hmm.
talking a lot about fairness. We're talking a lot about a lot of things, and people are disagreeing on the definitions, and I'm confused by some of it.
Hmm.
But I think every educator knows what reasonable means.
Yeah.
Given what that kid has and who they are and what they've been through, what can I do to help them go to the next level, whatever that is? And
Yeah.
it may be 4 levels below where you wish they were, but we have to start with where they are. So
Hmm.
they need a reasonable chance. And I think everybody knows what I mean by that, a reasonable chance.
Hmm. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast and learning so much from you and hearing your thoughts about a variety of topics that are really, they're really trending today. And you know that you've been working a while on the teacher self-care and social emotional learning and
Mhm.
all those type of things before it really took off this year. Where can people find you online and connect with you?
Just go to debbiesilver.com, www.debbie.silver.com. And my website, you could connect with me in any way there. And If you want to email me, it's debbie@debbiesilver.com.
Oh,
Trying to
great.
make this really simple. But I answer all my email. I answer teachers. I have teachers that write to me all the time. Just some of them just need to be heard. And, if I don't do anything but go, I understand, that's got to be
Mhm.
hard. That's what I want to be. I want to be a resource for teachers in any way that I can do it.
Great. Well, I'll make sure I have that information in the show notes. Thanks so much for being on the Out of the Trenches
Thank you for
podcast
having
today.
me, Dana. I can't believe an hour's gone. This is so fun.